The reason that you're struggling to lose weight isn't because of bad habits, your willpower, or your discipline. It's because your mind has been conditioned to crave and overeat the wrong things and basically just sabotage your progress without you even realizing it. The good news is that just like how you were conditioned this way, you can rewire your brain the opposite way so that you can lose weight much easier and much faster. Before that, if you don't know me already, my name is Ardi. I've lost over 25 kilograms, I've gotten lean, and I've been studying psychology for the past 5 years of my life, 2 years in college and 3 years in university. And I'm basically bringing in all of that information to help people lose weight much easier and much faster. So let's get straight into it. So guys, this is pretty much behaviorism and conditioning at a bird's eye view. So hopefully we can now really dive in and understand how these conditioning or how conditioning has led you to where you are right now. So in behaviorism, there are two schools that I really want to talk to you about, and both probably have like equal influences over you, and I think unconsciously they're probably the reason that you're struggling to lose weight in the first place. And these conditionings are classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Let's begin with classical conditioning. It's a little bit easier. Now when you see this, right, don't get, worried or stressed out that you won't be able to understand these scientific, concepts. But hopefully I'll be able to like break this down into a simple enough way for you to understand how this like affects you and your life. So classical conditioning is really simple, don't worry about it. It's basically when a neutral stimulus, gets paired with or associated with another stimulus in order to produce a conditioned response. Now, that's overly sciencey, but basically what it means is that two things, when you do them or you experience them like in close succession with each other, the outcome of that like pair, that is your conditioning. So like a really easy way to explain this would be when a dog sees food, he starts to salivate because his body and his brain automatically knows that he's gonna probably eat the food. So his body gets him ready to eat the food by producing a lot of saliva. Now, a neutral stimulus is one that doesn't produce any response. So for example, if a dog listens to a whistle for the first time, he's not going to give a fuck about the whistle, okay? He literally just doesn't give a shit about the whistle. That doesn't produce like any response in his body. So that is the no condition response. However, if you pair the food and the whistle together, that would obviously produce salivation because he sees the food, right? He sees the food and then his body starts salivating. Now, over time, if you keep on doing these, associations or these pairs, over time, if you keep presenting him food whilst you blow a whistle, he's going to associate them to be the same thing, or like associate them to be in like the same package, and pretty much that's his like conditioned response. And so after all of this like classical conditioning, even without the food, just hearing the bell, that would make him salivate because of this association. So like food doesn't even have to be present, and that right there, that is the conditioned response. That is pretty much the basis of classical conditioning. So a more sort of scientific example or a more relevant example for you and your life would be from this study. So I read this study and I found this fascinating into how really conditioning affects us and our appetite. And so basically you can go read the abstract for yourself. It basically states that food cue reactivity, which is basically what we're talking about here with classical conditioning, that pretty much leads to a very strong motivation to eat, even if you're not hungry. Like, this is fucking insane. You've been conditioned to overeat even though you're not hungry, and that is probably or most definitely the reason why you became fat or overweight in the first place. Now, here is like a really good example of your daily life that I found in this study. A daily life analogy is that if one always eats crisps on the couch when watching TV, just sitting on the couch and hearing the TV might make you crave crisps, even if you're not hungry for crisps at all. So if we go back and apply this exact same concept back towards classical conditioning, the unconditioned stimulus, that could be something like the crisps that make you, really crave more crisps. And the neutral stimulus that doesn't really give a response, that could be the couch or your television series, right? So once you pair those two together, once you pair the crisps and pair the couch or the TV together, that produces, the unconditional response of craving. But then, after you've been conditioned enough times, even without, feeling hungry or feeling the craving, just you sitting down on the couch or just you watching your TV series, that can trigger your cravings for the crisps. And I've actually been through this quite a lot before, because every single time that I used to sit down to watch Netflix, I needed some sort of snack in my hands just to keep myself occupied, whether it be popcorn, or whether it be a full-blown meal that I can eat whilst watching. But little did I know that was pretty much the product of classical conditioning. And when I broke out of this cycle, which I'm going to tell you exactly how to do later on in this video, that was when I could finally break free of this conditioning and finally start to lose weight. So the next type of conditioning that I want to talk to you about is operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning, so this one actually came first. This was done by Pavlov and his dogs. But then this came a little bit later, and this was done by B.F. Skinner. And operant conditioning sort of builds on top of classical conditioning. This sort of just states that the reason for behavior is just that association between the unconditioned stimulus and the conditioned stimulus. But operant conditioning sort of takes it one step further and says that behavior is due to the specific consequences that are associated with a certain type of behavior, like eating. So if you're rewarded for a behavior that you've done in the past, you're much more likely to repeat that behavior in the future. And in the same way, if you've been punished for a behavior in the past, you will decrease the chances of that behavior happening in the future. Talking through this, I think it's really easy to understand why eating junk food or binge eating can get reinforced. And it's because binge eating is such a big reward. When you eat junk food, that dopamine spike from your brain is so big that it's such a primary motivator for you to go and do that again, because that dopamine spike is a very big reward for you. And not only that, I can think of many other rewards that you get when you engage in binge eating or junk foods. For example, if you feel sad or anxious or bored, and you turn to junk food for, pleasure or comfort, just that feeling that junk food brings you, that in and of itself is a very big reinforcer or reward. And what do we know about rewards from operant conditioning? Is that when you've been rewarded because you've eaten junk food before in the past, you're so much more likely to do that again in the future. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about the schedules of reinforcement. Oh, sorry, not schedules of reinforcement, the types of reinforcement. A positive reinforcement means presenting a pleasant stimuli after doing a behavior. So this is pretty much what it's saying is positive is adding on something pleasurable to your life. For example, if you eat junk food, pizza or McDonald's, right, you get a sense of high dopamine and this dopamine spike in your brain. And that is very pleasant because who doesn't like pleasure or who doesn't like dopamine? And so that is positive reinforcement because you're giving a pleasurable outcome for your behavior. So the example set out here is giving a child praise for cleaning their room reinforces their positive behavior. Every single child wants to be praised. So if they clean their room and they get praised for it by an authority figure, which is their parents, they're so much more likely to do that again because they want to feel that praise again. Similarly, if you eat junk food and you get so much dopamine from it, you're motivated to do that again in the future, and again and again and again, which probably explains the reason why most people fail on their diets. Now the next one I want to talk about is negative reinforcement, and this involves removing an unpleasant stimulus when a desired behavior, or in this case undesired behavior, occurs. So what does removing an unpleasant stimulus look like? This is something that the example given here is that when a child, they complete their homework on time, the parents say that, okay, you don't have to do this chore. That chore is a negative, unpleasant experience because let's face it, like no one wants to do those tasks. And so once you do the behavior, which is, completing the homework, they take away that unpleasant stimulus, which therefore is a reward. And so going back to our example of emotional eating, whenever you feel sad or whenever you feel anxious or whenever you feel bored, that inherently is a negative state. That is a negative emotion. You don't really want to be in that. That is unpleasant. And so when you eat junk food, when you binge eat and get that dopamine spike, that removes the negative feelings and the negative state that you're currently in. And so removing that negative state, that is negative reinforcement because it takes away that unpleasant stimulus. Therefore, both of these play on you to sort of increase the chances of you binge eating and turning to junk food later in the future. And again, you can see that this sort of just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. How do you break free of all of this conditioning that we've just learned about? Well, step one is basically awareness, okay, which is pretty much this video. The reason you've fallen victim, to conditioning, both classical and operant, is because you're simply not aware of it. It's like you're in a boxing match with an invisible opponent. Like, how are you meant to win? Like, genuinely, like, if you can't see your opponent and his moves that he's gonna make, you basically just can't win. But learning about it, as with anything really, as we're trying to get better at anything, awareness and knowing that you've fallen victim to this, that is step number one. And by virtue of you just watching this video, you've already done step number one. So we can then move on to step number two, which is replacing your associations. The whole problem with you being conditioned to overeat is inherently because you find food more pleasurable than anything else. So right now, food is associated with immense pleasure. And as we talked about earlier, immense pleasure, that's a very big motivator and a very big reward for increasing the chances of that behavior happening over and over again in the future. But there is a way to override this. And you might be asking, well, how do we do that? Well, as you can see already on the board, you need to find something more meaningful and more fulfilling than the dopamine that you gain from binge eating. And it will be incredibly helpful if you found a sense of fulfillment and pleasure that is greater than the dopamine from losing weight. And this is pretty much the difference between serotonin and dopamine. You might have heard of these like two hormones before. Serotonin is actually the happiness hormone and dopamine is actually the pleasure hormone. But the funny thing is that it's actually an inverse relationship, okay? So you can't have both. And what this means is that when one goes up, the other must come down. It's a case of picking your poison, okay? You can be addicted to one, but you can never be addicted to both. And now what serotonin does is makes you feel incredibly happy and incredibly fulfilled. Like, for example, if you've ever worked incredibly hard on something for one day and at the end of it, you're completely exhausted. You've completely exhausted all your mental and your physical brain power, okay? But you feel really happy and really fulfilled that you've put in that work and effort on something, right? Because you're actually moving towards your goals. Now, you feel incredibly happy at the end of that day, but you haven't actually done that many dopaminergic activities during that day. For example, scrolling on your phone, scrolling through reels, eating junk food. You haven't done a lot of that, but you feel really happy and fulfilled. And that's because your serotonin is up and your dopamine is down. Whereas it can be completely on the other way, where your dopamine is up or your serotonin is down. For example, have you ever spent just a day of just a full day of eating junk food and scrolling on your phone, watching Netflix, just not really doing much for the whole day? The whole day you've been sort of spiking your dopamine and getting this immense sense of pleasure, but at the end of the day, you don't feel fulfilled. You don't feel like you've done anything worthwhile or moved towards your goals. That's because your dopamine is up, but your serotonin actually goes down. And so that's the choice, that's the battle. You can be addicted to one, but never both. Okay, so, and it'll be really helpful if you sort of make this switch over in your mind right now, that you're going to be going for the constant serotonin and fulfillment and drive that you get from completing your goals, such as losing weight and building a better aesthetic physique. Or you can pick the other poison, which is just dopamine, where in the short term you're going to have incredibly high pleasure, but in the long term, and long term's like anything over a day, you're not going to feel very pleasurable, or you're not going to be feeling like, very fulfilled or happy with the way that you've been going. And I would definitely know which one I'd pick. So we can move on to step number 3, which is click the link in the description. Nah, I'm just playing with you. The step number 3 is you need to replace your taste buds, right? This whole problem of conditioning and getting used to binge eating and junk foods is because junk food, and or more specifically high calorie, high fat, high sugar foods are inherently tasty and highly palatable, which just makes you want to eat more and more and more. But what if we can make your brain completely forget what junk food tastes like? And the mechanism behind this is that your taste buds are completely malleable. So for example, I am a big 0 calorie drink, like Pepsi drinker, pretty much. And for the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've been constantly drinking Pepsi Mango. I've become completely desensitized to what it tastes like. And so if I drink Pepsi Mango, it basically tastes like nothing to me. And this one day, I bought a Coke Zero Oreo flavor. I don't know if you can see that. A Coke Zero Oreo flavor. And the first time that I had this, it was like the best drink that I've ever tasted in my whole life. And so I went back, I bought a 24 cans of Oreo Pepsi, and I pretty much just stocked it up. And for the next 2 weeks from that point, all I drank was Pepsi Oreo. Now, I happened to find a can of Pepsi Mango again, just, back in the fridge. And I opened that and I tasted that again. And once again, that was the best feeling or the best taste that I've ever tasted in my life, because I had become desensitized to Oreo Coke. And so because I'd become so desensitized to it, that Pepsi Mango, even though just a week ago I had been I couldn't even taste it anymore, now it was a completely new, different flavor. And the whole point of this story is that I just really wanted to show you that your taste buds are completely malleable. But how do you do this, right? Humans are naturally forgetful, right? If you cut out junk food from your diet completely, then your brain will naturally just forget what junk food tastes like. Once you forget what junk food tastes like, that same pleasure and that same happiness that you get from eating junk food, that's going to be transferred over to healthy foods. And when this switch happens, right, obviously inherently healthy food is not as calorie dense or has as many calories as that junk foods. So you can eat much more of it, stay full, and still lose so much more weight and so much faster than you would if you had junk food. Sure, I mean, does cutting out junk food completely from your diet whilst you're losing weight, does it suck? Yes, of course it does. Everyone likes junk food. You and me have gotten fat before because we like the taste of junk food. But I feel, in my humble opinion, it's completely necessary to cut out this junk food whilst you're on the path to losing weight. And sure, other YouTubers, I've seen a lot of videos where people advocate that you can eat junk food but still lose weight. And of course, obviously, you're your own person. Feel free to do that. Or click off this video and go watch them instead. But in my opinion, this is the way that has worked the best for me personally. And if you're anyone like me, then hopefully you might feel the same. So just give this a go. And I want to bring up this really interesting point for cutting out cheat meals. What have you heard from all of the people that have got through drug addictions? And there's a very specific point why I'm bringing up drug addictions, by the way. Everyone that has gone through a drug addiction and has got through it, okay, they've said that once they get through the withdrawal symptoms and the initial hardness of that phase, their life gets so much better. Now, the exact same concept applies to cutting out junk foods from your diet. The first 2 weeks are literally going to be hell on earth. You're literally going to be experiencing withdrawal symptoms, especially from sugar. You're going to be experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and it's going to be one of the hardest challenges that you've ever done. You're going to be constantly craving junk foods, and you're constantly going to be hungry, even though your body physically doesn't need food, but your brain is going to trick you into thinking that you're hungry just so that you can eat these high calorie foods. And you're literally going to be questioning if everything is even worth it. Like, is cutting out junk food worth it? Is losing weight even worth it? Is looking better even worth it? But I need you to stick through this, and trust me, it definitely is worth it. So like, when you eat only clean foods and you forget what junk food tastes like, you're not going to be controlled by food, because healthy food is less tasty. It gives you less of a dopamine spike, and so you're not gonna feel that need to constantly go back to eating junk foods once you get used to healthy foods. Now, once you get healthy foods, right, you're gonna get a healthy level of dopamine spikes instead of the high surges that junk food gives you. Your baseline of dopamine, once you get used to eating healthy foods, is gonna go back to a much healthier baseline. By the way, if you're wondering like what healthy food is, I've been saying healthy food a lot. It's basically just one ingredient foods. That's like the most helpful advice that I've heard about what healthy food is. So for example, and like your meals should only consist of one ingredients. So for example, the only ingredient in sweet potato is sweet potato, right? That's a one ingredient food. Or another example would be beef mince. The only ingredient in beef mince, like if you flip it around and you look at the food labels, the only ingredient is beef, right? Whereas if you, like, let's say you go onto your favorite cereal brand and you flip it over, and there's literally like 50 ingredients on the back of it. You know, if you go onto your favorite pack of crisps, there's literally 50 ingredients on the back of that food label, which that means that it's probably a junk food and it's highly processed. So my meals currently just consist of one ingredient foods. And I don't mean to say that I only eat beef or that I only eat sweet potatoes in a meal, but basically a normal standard meal for me right now would be beef mince, sweet potato, and my favorite vegetable, which right now is sweet corn. That meal consists of only 3 ingredients, okay? And every part of that meal has only been made from one ingredient. Now, I would class that as a healthy meal. Hopefully you can take this definition away as well, and hopefully that helps you a lot as well. Now, once you get more and more used to eating this healthy food, you're genuinely going to start liking it, okay? You're going to get used to it and you're going to start liking it so much more. And I know that this was a sentiment that I always had when I was trying to lose weight. I would always look at these influencers online and look at their diets for a day, like their full day of eating videos and stuff. I would always think to myself, like, how come they can eat that healthy food consistently on a day-to-day basis and not get bored of it? It's because they've gotten used to healthy food. That's it. The majority, 95% of their diet is probably from healthy foods. And that is exactly because their brain has gotten used to the taste of it. And now their brain actually likes to eat that kind of food. And like, this is also why for the duration of my program that you can find, from the link in the description, blah, blah, blah. That's exactly why I don't let my clients have cheat meals or junk foods when they're in my program. It's because quitting junk food, and especially sugar, is quite literally like breaking free from an addiction. Like, I want to draw your attention to this study over here. Intense sweetness surpasses the cocaine reward. I find that absolutely crazy. So basically what this study is saying is that they gave rats, right, the choice between sugar and the choice between literal cocaine. And the rats still preferred sugar over the cocaine. Basically what they found is that virtually all rats preferred saccharin, which is a form of sugar, over quite literally cocaine, which is a highly addictive drug. I find that absolutely crazy. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine. I think that sort of goes to show you that why junk food and like modern food and processed foods is so bad for you, or like bad for you whilst you're trying to lose weight on a diet. It's because it's simply addictive. Like, the more you eat it, the more you want to eat it in the future. And just because of its nature, junk foods are highly caloric. And so the more you eat of that, the fatter you get, the more overweight you get. And the worse you look, the worse you feel about yourself as well. Like, imagine if your family member was trying to quit crack or cocaine. You wouldn't let them have a cheat meal of crack every single Friday, would you? No. You wouldn't, because they're trying to get over their addiction and move on to a better life. So why would you allow yourself the junk food or the cheat meal every single Friday as a reward. All that does is remind your brain that there are more tastier and higher calorie dense foods out there. And once your brain gets reminded of that, it's not allowed the space to go and adapt to actually liking the healthy food, which makes sticking to your diet so much harder. So hopefully I've rambled on and given you like enough of a case to sort of try, cutting out junk foods completely from your diet. Now, I really do hope that you have learned something new from this video. And like, if you decide to try out, like the advice in these comments, please be sure to go into the comments and let me know, because I would actually love to hear your experiences with this. Or if if you have any questions or any like general comments, go leave them down in the description. I do read like literally all of your comments, so you probably have 100% chance of me seeing it and responding. Now, if you want to get a copy of this board so that you can keep it and personalize it for you, and this is the board that I mean, so this one, and you can like personalize it to fit you and however you want to do with it, you can DM me on Instagram on adif.buvan and I can send it over to you for completely free. Don't worry about it. If you want to lose a bunch of weight and you want my personal help in doing so, feel free to scroll down and check out the link in the description. You don't have to, this isn't for everyone, but if you feel like you want an extra helping hand, then of course feel free to do that, but you don't have to. So thank you so much for watching and sticking around, and I genuinely hope that you have such an amazing day ahead of you.